Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Deuce85. And of course, this show is brought to you by the FTN Network, FTN Fantasy, FTN Daily, and FTN Bets on all social media, IG, Twitter, everything. We just had a video, so short on IG, blow up. Feeling pretty good about that. Lots going on. The Final Four is winding down. We're into the national championship game. We're going to talk in depth about the showdown with the huge prize pools. We're talking about some big up top prizes for this one. It's your last opportunity to play CBB DFS for a good long while before we go into hibernation for the summer. What kind of contest are we talking about? A 50K to first over on DraftKings. It is fun, phenomenal stuff. But before we get into that, we need to talk a little bit about some of the news that's been going on. Specifically, what just happened now, today, within the last hour, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And, a while back, we have some pretty big Arkansas fans on the show, and lost a bet to them, and I had to do something. And I think this calls for me to do that something once again. Woo! Pig Suey. What is up, Arkansas? Arkansas fans who are here hanging out with us, I appreciate it. How about John Calipari, Coach Cal to the Arkansas Razorbacks? That is some wild, wild stuff. That came together very, very quickly. Think about what had to happen for Coach Cal to end up in Arkansas. Muss and that whole drama there, with their AD. Basically, SMU firing Rob Lanier, who's a good coach. Rob Lanier is a good coach. I mean, a lot of people were stunned and like, what is SMU thinking about here? Why would they be firing Rob Lanier? They were a 20-win team this year. Yeah, in his first season with them, they struggled a little bit. He was solid during his time at Georgia State. Like Rob Lanier, he's a good coach for SMU. So firing him starts a chain of events. Okay. USC starts looking at Coach Muss. Andy Enfield says, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'll take the SMU job. He goes to SMU. Muss and the whole breakup there. He heads to USC. Already takes, Josh Cohen, the UMass transfer, with him. Suddenly, we're like, oh my God, what's going on? Arkansas doesn't have a coach. Calipari staying in Kentucky. They can't afford that huge buyout. It's massive. Who could afford that? I mean, they could afford it. Wrong terminology. They can afford it. But who wants to just piss away that kind of money? So they're going to endure Calipari one more year. However, this opportunity presents itself for him to get out of town, and Kentucky doesn't have to fit the bill. Arkansas doesn't have to foot the bill either. And you're talking about a situation where everybody wins there. Arkansas is happy because they have a really popular and famous coach who, say what you will about him, he recruits really well. He recruits NBA talent. He doesn't necessarily develop NBA talent like he'll lead you to believe, but he gets it, right? A couple of things here to make this happen. And I know those of you who have tuned in for the DFS breakdown, we're going to get to that. But, this is what we're going to be doing all summer, talking about these kind of things. Anyways, the things that had to happen additionally to get Calipari to take this job, basically like major, not only a salary that's in the 8-9 million region per year, but nil NIL assurances, meaning, hey, I want to be able to go out and get transfers and pay and, get them deals. That's what I'm being told is in the $6 million range. That's their NIL promise. So that's massive. You can get a lot of guys there through the transfer portal. Arkansas has the facilities, they have the fan base, they have the money to make that happen. The bringing in the transfers that he wants to do, so they're going to let him do that. And then his freshman class, like I'm hearing that that they're going to make a major pull to getting those freshmen that he had at the Kentucky, coming in this year, because he always recruits well. That's just what he does. But the assurance there is that, hey, you can bring those guys with us or with you. Get your class here to Arkansas. Let's make this happen. Let's do this. And it's happened. And suddenly we're looking at Arkansas with Coach Calipari. It's wild. It is wild. Now Kentucky, now they've got to make a move, right? They're in search season. Wild enough, obviously you're going to hear a lot about, big names like Dan Hurley, which that's obviously any coaching job that becomes available, that program, like near the top of their list, like we would love to have Dan Hurley. Who wouldn't want Dan Hurley? The dude he's going to go down as one of the greats. I mean, at this stage, like the way we look at Jay Wright is the way we're going to look at Dan Hurley. UConn, if you don't think UConn's a blue blood at this point, you will tomorrow around this time. They're not getting Dan Hurley. Why the hell would he ever leave UConn? That would be like such a slap in the face. He would go from like the kind of the playful villain, right? And like people say he's a villain, but he's not really a villain, to a real hated villain. I think the obvious answer is Nate Oates, and Alabama fans would not like to hear that, would not to like to lose Nate Oates, but he plays a brand of basketball that's clearly exciting. It works. He, going to Kentucky with his type of recruiting and what they'll provide him, like that's just a no-brainer slam dunk if they can get Nate Oates. I think it's a real possibility. The other one that you're going to hear a lot is Scott Drew, whose name, he's being forgot about a lot, but he's one of the best coaches in our game today. Scott Drew's name's going to be flying around there as well. And if that happens, that'll start a new chain of events, because if he goes to Kentucky, that's going to mean Jerome Tang goes to Baylor. I know Tang just reaffirmed his staying with Kansas State and not the Arkansas job, because Arkansas just whiffed. I mean, shit, they just whiffed on Chris Beard. They just whiffed on Jerome Tang. Arkansas fans didn't even want Jerome Tang, which is a little bit silly. I know this year wasn't great, but Jerome Tang's a good coach. He would have done fine there. But Baylor, Jerome Tang, that obviously makes way too much sense, right? So that would start a whole new thing, and then Kansas State job would be available, and then the chaos that is college basketball coaching and transfers and everything like that. So it's just a huge thing. The next 48. It's crazy because who would ever the national title game is about to go up. Everything in the industry, everybody in the industry is talking about the Natty game, right? And then suddenly, whose name would come up in a coaching job to take over the news? But John Calipari, nobody else, but Calipari. So, a lot of excitement there. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of people's takes over the next few days on just what that's going to look like with the coaching search here. I had to tell my Arkansas fan I did the Pig Sooie call. But man, that's just crazy. So we're gonna see a lot of flips here, recruits wise, and it's just really gonna be wild the next few days. Let's pull that up real quick, actually. All right. So we just had the McDonald's All-American game as well. So the big one that I'll be looking at is my man Boogie Fland, who I like ever since his freshman season when I had noticed Boogie Fland, like he was my favorite player in this class. Really excited, great point guard. He did an excellent job in the McDonald's All-American game. And I know a lot of that can be hit or miss. Like McDonald's All-American game is not a litmus test for who's going to be good and who's not going to be good. We know that. It's an all-star game, whatever. But he looked good, and it's hard not to be excited about that. So that's one player that's in this Kentucky class, potentially maybe headed to Arkansas or maybe even headed somewhere else. I would love Boogie Fland at UConn. That's not going to happen, but this kid's like throwback point guard. If you haven't seen him play before, just wait. He is phenomenal. I guess what will be the other one? Jaden Quaintance. See what happens there. Obviously Kentucky always has a strong class. Was Carter Knox hanging around, Billy Richmond. So we'll see what happens with all of these guys. But there's going to be a lot of dominoes to fall here. But just crazy to think about. It started with SMU firing Rob Lanier. Most people wondering, like, why the hell would they do that? And now we have Calipari at Arkansas. So crazy, one of those not butterfly effect things, but just, like the chain of events that had to happen here. Just absolutely blows my mind how that went down. Totally. So that is that. There's a lot of troll tweets going on. SMU blew a 15-point second-half lead to Indiana State in the first round of the NIT less than 3 weeks ago, and now John Calipari is going to Arkansas. And Sicko's CBB committee says Robbie Avila is to blame for all of this. Oh man, I just love Twitter. How could you not? How could you not love it, man? Honestly, just some hilarious stuff going on here. We'll get into the slate here in just a minute. Looking at it, Nate Oates, man, he comes with a hefty buyout, 18 mil. Scott Drew, 4.5 mil. Bruce Pearl, 7 mil. I don't think they're going to get Bruce Pearl. Then, of course, Billy Donovan's name's going to come up. Billy Donovan's not coming back to coach college basketball, guys. Like, maybe if NIL wasn't what it is in the transfer portal, just a wild, wild west situation, maybe you'd see Billy Donovan come back. But there's a reason Jay Wright, one of the best coaches of our generation, decided to call it quits when he could have easily continued to coach for many, many, many years. Boeheim out of it, like Roy Williams out of it. They don't want to do this 24/7. Like, coaching in the NBA is, and it's not even a hot take, but some people take it that way. Coaching in the NBA is so much easier than college basketball. You're dealing with grown men who are adults. Like, you have to babysit them to a degree, but for the most part, if you have a veteran team, you're not having to make sure that they're not out doing stuff. You have to with your college kids. You have to make sure they're happy. You have to be constantly looking at the transfer portal. You have to constantly reaffirm with your commits that they're actually going to come there, and you have to work to re-recruit your team at the end of every season. Plus, you have NIL into the mix now, where everybody's, where it was before, like, oh, I'm going into the NBA draft to get some, some advice, see what I need to work on, and then I'll come back. Now it's, hey, I'm going to hit the transfer portal to see what else is out there for me. I don't mind it. I'm a big proponent of the transfer portal, but that's the reason why we're seeing guys like Billy Donovan. They're not going to come around the college game anymore. So once Billy Donovan comes up and says, no, I'm not going to do that, then it's going to be Nate Oates, or Dan Hurley, who's not going to take the job. Then Nate Oates, who I think really is probably the best fit. That $4.5 million buyout on Scott Drew is pretty interesting. That's the one that I think we probably see. If I had to guess right now at 9:15 in the evening, the night before the Natty, my guess would be Scott Drew will be the new coach at Kentucky. But we'll see what happens there. There's a lot of pieces still here to go. And the main reason we're here is to talk about the national title game. So we're going to get into that here. Let's check out the slate. It is a showdown slate, of course. A few things housekeeping wise. If you're new to the show or a veteran alike, thank you for checking out this CBB Super Show. What we do here typically during the season, we cover the DFS slate, mostly from a DraftKings perspective. We also talk about props, prize picks, and other sites, and any betting opportunities that come up, strategies, as well as core plays, talking numbers, matchups, all of that good stuff. Now, the show, this will be the final, obviously, DFS breakdown show because there won't be any more slates to break down. This is the end of the road. We're putting a nice bow on the 2023/24 NCAA season. Sad times. But we are going to still be going live each and every Wednesday for the next 4 months. Count them, 4 months before we start getting back into our slate breakdowns. And what those shows are going to include, there'll be some live shows, but there's also going to be some pre-recorded shows that just go on, that officially go on air then. We're going to be doing some interviews with some coaches, players, talking transfer portal stuff, talking coaching changes. We're also going to have some other guests in the industry, just overall talking about college basketball and the industry itself. So we're going to be shifting gears a little bit there. Still going to relate to DFS betting purposes, fits and all that. We're going to do team previews. We're going to do conference previews. We're going to talk about all that stuff and get really in depth so that when the season does pop up, you're already ready. You don't have to try to get acclimated in 48 hours, 24 hours, like, oh, what's this team about? You'll already know because you'll have watched our show about it and we'll talk about it in depth. And hopefully there will be some additional interviews during those specific shows. Already been reaching out to several players and coaches who are interested. So we'll see how that works out. Pretty excited. I don't want to, count my chickens before they hatch, but I do think that we're going to have a really positive experience and there's going to be a very good turnout for us to do the sports media thing this summer. Once we get to about mid-July, maybe sooner, we'll shift gears. We'll switch into the CFB version of the show because, week 0 is about August 24th area. So week 0 of the college football season will be in full effect. We'll switch gears mid-July, covering the different teams that have made changes, conference previews, interviews, all kinds of stuff. So we'll be doing our thing there. And we'll be pretty much neck deep into college football stuff at that point for several months until we get into about, October, Halloween area. We'll start doing our CBB preview stuff and shorts, and then we'll be, double covering both sports, which is the mad time, but a fun time. I really am going to miss that chaos. But I suppose I'll spend the next few months, getting to know my family again. And I'm sure they're excited about that. So that's everything that's going on. If you could make sure to smash that like button, share the show, comment, interact, question, comment, concern, anything at all that can help. Impressions are key. YouTube algorithm loves it when you guys drop likes, when you guys comment, all of that good stuff. So, I appreciate every one of you who has continued to support us throughout the season. Let's get into the slate. We have Purdue versus Connecticut, a national title game. I'm a big proponent, buzzer beaters, upsets, Cinderella runs. Like, I love that as much as the next guy. That's what makes our sport so great when it comes to March Madness and the tournament specifically. Who doesn't love a good story? St. Peter's going deep into the tournament. George Mason several years ago, 15s over 2, 16s over 1s. It's fun. We all love it. It's just like a fantastic experience, right? But what happens in those, Elite Eights, Final Fours, when those teams make it, it's a great story, but what happens? Usually they gas out, right? A team that, they belonged, they made it, they had a lot of stuff go their way. Just one of those amazing runs where if you played the tournament again 90 more times, that result would not happen. They would have been knocked out in the first round or the second round, right? They gas out. They come up against a team that's, had a chance to see them, doesn't overlook them, doesn't, they've got a week to really grind it out, figure out how to stop them, and they absolutely pulverize them. We see it time and time again. It's okay when it happens. Like, it's not like, oh, this tournament sucked, this was a failure, but it definitely has a little bit of a lackluster feel to it, especially when you get into the final and you have a situation where UConn just, pelts them, or Baylor destroys Gonzaga. It's not nearly as fun. Which, what can you go back and what tournament final do you think of come to mind in the last decade where you're like, damn, that was one of the best games I ever watched in a title game. Like, damn, you could never, ever have that recreated. I don't know if I'll ever see a better game in my life. For me, that goes back, already 8 years ago, which is just absolutely maddening to know how old we're getting. But that North Carolina Villanova final where Marcus Page, hits the circus double, triple, quadruple clutch shot where he had no business making that shot. Villanova, striking right back there with the Jenkins game winner. That sequence, like, I still watch that highlight to this day, and it still gives me butterflies. I still feel like, holy shit, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. That sequence, I just don't know that it would ever be replicated, man. Like, that a close game, tit for tat, punch for punch, hit for hit, and to go a last second shot matched by a last second shot. Like, that is the ultimate for a tournament final. And the reason I'm kind of harping on this is because say what you will, maybe you wanted NC State to win, obviously. Maybe you were rooting for Alabama. Maybe you wanted to see the Vols. There's a myriad of teams you would have liked to have seen here. But at the end of the day, we've got number 1 versus number 2 in Purdue versus UConn. And we're talking about, Ken Palm, number 1 versus number 2. A lot of you, in case you're wondering, what are you talking about? So for all intents and purposes, these are, analytically speaking, and with our eyeballs, the 2 best teams in America for college basketball. The Purdue Boilermakers coming back from an embarrassing situation where they, lost to a 16 seed. Not the first team to do it, but losing to a 16 seed, it's hard to live that down. There's only really one way to actually put that behind you and not be dogged with it for the rest of your life, or turn it into a situation where like, hey, these guys beat us. It is what it is. Congrats to them. But here's what we have. We have a national title. And there was one other team that was able to do that. Who was that? Oh yeah, Virginia. So Virginia loses to a 16 seed. Everybody mocks them. Everyone's mocking them again this year. But they follow that up with a magical tournament run. Monkey off the back. They, all that pressure, all that, that happened. They didn't have Hunter the year before. It's important to note that. But they win the title. All questions answered, all that pain and suffering that they went through, gone. So we have that storyline with Purdue where they've been on a mission this year. They're 34-4. They lost an early season overtime game to Northwestern. They dropped a blowout loss on the road to Nebraska. People were just like, man, this team sucks. They lost to Ohio State real close on the road. These are all road games that they lost. And then, of course, the neutral court Big Ten tournament game in which it took a mammoth performance by Wisconsin, and they had to beat them in overtime. So 2 of their 4 losses happening in overtime. This Purdue team is the real deal. We have to give them their flowers, their credit. Zach Edey has been on a mission. Purdue's guard play has been so much better than last year. They're in a position here. That storyline is there. If they win the title, they become that team that used the embarrassing loss to a 16 seed to catapult themselves into the next year and win a title. Now, UConn, the defending champions that just mauled their way through last year's tournament like it was nothing. They're doing the same thing this year. Their storyline, no team has gone back-to-back since 2007 when the Florida Gators did it, coached by Billy Donovan. That Gators team was phenomenal. But the thing about it is they were a group of veterans, similar, UConn's kind of veterans, but they had majority of their guys back the next year. They didn't have to retool, reshape, redo their roster. One thing about this UConn team, they did. Obviously, Tristan Newton, Donovan Clingan, Alex Caravan, those guys are back. But aside from Newton, who had a big game in the title game last year, Clingan, kind of a secondary role. Caravan, more of a secondary role, although he played a lot of big minutes. Getting those 3 back after losing Andre Jackson, who was just the heart and soul of that team. Adama Sanogo, who's turned out to be just an absolute machine. And Jordan Hawkins, multiple, and Joey California, of course. Most teams, that would be too hard to come back from. That would just be an impossible situation. And Samson Johnson was on that team too. So they return a decent nucleus, but bringing in that freshman class that Hurley did, going out to the transfer portal and getting Cam Spencer, who's just that's my guy, man. I love Cam Spencer. And really doing it with a few new pieces. So they're a little bit different than Florida, but somewhat similar in that regard. So that storyline for them being that first team to go back-to-back in a long time. So we're in for a treat. I mean, and they're doing it the right way, a 6:20 start. I know it's late for you East Coasters, but the game should be in prime time. That's just how it has to be. The women's championship game was at noon today on the West Coast. I'm a pretty big proponent of women's sports, so I'm not dogging on it because I like watching women's basketball, especially the WNBA. But I mean, who's able to watch that at noon today? I had a honey-do list to work on. I had some stuff. We had a new vehicle that we got for us that it had some work needed to be done. So I did my best mechanic impression, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna check this out. Oh shoot, the game's almost over. I missed it. That should have been a primetime thing. So that was a whiff on the women's game. So, primetime basketball with the national championship, it just hits different. That's going to be fun. I cannot wait. We are in for a treat. This is going to be one of those games where we might potentially have a classic on our hands. UConn has been just mauling every opponent this year as well. Have to give it to Alabama. They were on their ass, and Alabama shot ridiculously well. UConn, they weren't shooting as well. They were having some issues, but that halftime adjustment hits, it's just another ball game. And it took a while. Alabama was still hitting shots. Grant Nelson, hats off to Grant Nelson. As much as I dog him, he had a phenomenal, showing against North Carolina, and then another career-like type of game against UConn. Grant Nelson, I will never, ever say that you can't compete at the highest level against the biggest competition, the highest level competition on the biggest stage. You shut me up and many, many others. Grant Nelson is a legitimate guy, and we'll be talking about those performances for years and years to come, even if Alabama didn't win the title. And a lot of times, Final Four teams that didn't win the title, they get forgotten about, but that's a performance that we'll be referencing, especially when it comes to Alabama history and the lore behind that, because Grant Nelson, he damn near did it. Mark Sears, huge game. Aaron Estrada, man, talk about the game Aaron Estrada had in the first. Let's talk about the first half Aaron Estrada had. I know in the second half he kind of disappeared, but that first half he was all over the place, dropping dimes, grabbing rebounds, hitting shots. The second half was more about Sears and Nelson, but Estrada kept them in it in the first half and kept it close, forcing turnovers, making things happen. Their bench didn't give them much, not so much of a surprise. Latrell Wrightsell did play a ton of minutes, 30, which, dealing with the concussion protocol, he wasn't much of a factor. He had a couple threes, but overall, and Rylan Griffin was okay, but overall, Grant Nelson and Mark Sears nearly carried them to a victory. The problem is UConn is so damn good that if somebody's having a bad night, like Tristan Newton's first half, Jesus, he was bad again. Stephen Castle came out. Geez. Do you think he's an NBA draft pick? Do you think he's a lottery pick? Yeah. This is the type of performance that will catapult him. He was already going to be a first-round pick. If he had a terrible tournament, the guy's getting drafted in the first round. It's a weaker draft anyways, so they say. But a performance like that, and the Sweet 16 game that he had, I mean, he's obviously going to be a lottery pick, and he has one more chance to show it. His first half was amazing. Alabama made that conscious decision to be like, okay, we're going to sag off Castle. He doesn't really shoot threes, and when he does, he's not a huge threat. We'll make him beat us. But they were so far off of him that he's a future NBA player, so I don't care if he's shooting like 10% for the year. He's going to make a wide open triple, and he made 2 of them before they had to adjust. It's pretty silly. They made an adjustment there, and when they did, Alex Caravan, we've been waiting for Caravan to have that game, and 14 points, 8 rebounds. Maybe that's not that game. Maybe we want a 20 and 10 to be able to say that. But Caravan was a huge reason why they won that game, and ultimately probably should be considered the MVP of that Final Four matchup. Hit some key threes defensively. Geez, I think that was the best game defensively I've ever seen from Alex Caravan, and I've watched a ton of Alex Caravan over the last 2 years. He was a menace out there defensively, forcing turnovers, blocking shots. He just looked like an absolute menace, and that was the game I was waiting for, a confident Alex Caravan to step up the way he did. Cam Spencer was kind of struggling with his shot. Tristan Newton was struggling with this shot. Donovan Clingan wasn't rebounding very well. Caravan picked up on the glass and did a lot of really good things. And I got to give it to Alabama for not having much of a front court. They held Donovan Clingan to 18 and 5. He had 4 blocks. You don't want to do the Illinois thing and drive at him. He's always going to block shots. But holding Clingan to 18 and 5 when you have a subpar front court is really impressive on Alabama's part. So I have to give it up to them. They had a great game plan. The problem is UConn is so good. I've said it a million times. Say it again. Newton has a bad game. Here comes Cam Spencer. Donovan Clingan has a bad game. Here's Castle. Caravan has a bad game. Here's Newton. Like, they just have different options. Hassan Diarra was pretty horrible offensively in that game. Still had 5 rebounds, still 2 assists, a steal, still contributed over 20 minutes there. Diarra is just such a great 6th man on this team, and he's had some really big tournament games here. So even off the bench, Diarra is making things happen. You just don't get any reprieve. If you force one of them into a bad game, you're just surely going to get beat by someone else, and that's what makes this UConn team so hard. the quote that Dan Hurley said yesterday in his presser, I mean, geez, I had to chef's kiss, literally. Like, there's not a more beautiful sentence that I have heard in when it comes to college basketball. But talking about, we make a hard tournament look easy. And some might take that and be like, damn, what a blowhard. That guy is really, he's got a Folgers can of his own, like, gas, smelling himself. Why would he say that? And I don't take it as he's being overconfident. He literally means, like, this is phenomenal what we're seeing. Like, as a outsider looking in, how could you not be like, this UConn team was supposedly in the region of death, so everyone said, wow, how could the number 1 overall seed have to play all these hard teams? They proceed to beat all of them by an average of 27.8. And then they play an Alabama team who had almost a perfect game plan. Honestly, Alabama's game plan was flawless. They shot 48% from long range for that game. They were not missing shots. They had UConn in a position that nobody else has in 2 years of tournament games. But it still wasn't enough. They still lost 86-72. You roll out a near perfect game plan and still lose by double digits. We're talking about an all-time team here, an all-time coach and a group of kids that just aren't going to fold in a tough situation in a tournament. So hats off to Alabama, but this UConn team is phenomenal. And they've got the kid, Jalen Stewart, who played high school hoops in my backyard, basically. I loved him. I wanted him to go to my Huskies, these ones. But, he's barely even playing in this tournament. He had some nice, towards the end of the season, some nice games. He's going to be a big-time superstar next year. Dan Hurley, literally in his pressers, and Jalen Stewart, we want him to stay. He's going to be a big-time player for us next year. He'll have that experience. We want him to stay. Another interview. Hey, we want Jalen Stewart to stay. We know the transfer portal is exploding and going crazy. Jalen Stewart's going to be a huge part of this team next year. He's going to be our guy. Like, he, in the middle of a title run, he has to keep reaffirming in public, Jalen Stewart, we love you. You're our guy. Don't go anywhere. Just wild stuff. This UConn bench has guys who would start for like 90% of America. This UConn team is going to be tough. Really, really tough. Now, talking about the Purdue side, we're going to really just flesh out these games and then we'll go over the pricing. It's a showdown slate. So, really what more can I say? I'll give you some captain options and some builds and we'll call it a day. NC State also had a near pristine game plan. They executed so well defensively, forcing turnovers. Zach Edey had for him, a bad game, right? 20 points and 12 rebounds. That just speaks to how great Zach is. 20 points and 12 rebounds for most guys, like, that's a really good day at the office. That's a bad day for Zach Edey. You hold him to 20 and 12, you're generally going to be in a position to win because that means you're forcing those guards to beat you. Braden Smith scored 3 points. NC State took him out of the game. That's a second straight. That's actually maybe not a second straight game, but 3 straight halves, because in the second half of the Tennessee game, they did a nice job, the Vols did, of containing Braden Smith. I know he had 8 rebounds and 7 assists in that game, but he ended up with 9 points, most of which came in the first half. So we have seen 3 straight halves in which teams have somewhat figured out how to bother Braden Smith with physicality. He's still going to do what he does on the glass. He grabs rebounds, he drops assists, but he had 5 turnovers, 6 assists, 5 turnovers in that one, had 3 steals, 1 of 5 from long range, played all 40 minutes. He's going to be out there because he has to. He's their leader. But offensively, if you hold Zach Edey to 20 points, you hold Braden Smith to 3 points, you would think you would be able to beat Purdue, and you should have. Lance Jones stepped up when he had to. I will give it up. Lance Jones is somebody who I've been worried about during this tournament run. He has been exerting a lot of energy on defense. It's affected his offense negatively, and it's led to him, taking some questionable shots, doing some questionable things. He did 2 questionable things in that game. He took another bad shot, which his coach has said, Coach Painter has said in public, like, we got to get Lance Jones to calm down sometimes. And he made like this really ill-advised pass that sailed out. But he ended up in 38 minutes, knocking down 4 triples on 9 attempts, 14 points, 4 rebounds, and a steal. That was a big time, swing the other way. For a low-scoring game, getting 14 out of Lance Jones on 4 triples, that is enough to carry you when Smith and Edey have a relatively tough game. Had the Vols been able to do that and keep a full game of Smith down and Edey to 20, not 40 points, the Vols would be sitting in the Final Four and not Purdue. I think that's pretty clear. Fletcher Lawyer had 11. Trey Kaufman-Renn looked better at times. And then Mason Gillis, who I've been harping like, look out, Gillis a couple of years ago when Purdue made their deep run. It was all about Mason Gillis. He was the X factor. He's given up his starting spot. He's like, this kid has given up a starring role to be a bench guy and come in when they need him to. He plays solid defensive rebounds and he hits timely threes. And he hit timely threes in the game against NC State. 8 points, a couple of triples, 4 rebounds. That was enough in 24 minutes. So they got enough. The problem is 63 points for Purdue. Like, that's generally going to be a win for you. The problem is, yet again, for a 5th straight game, and there's going to be challenges. We had a video go viral on IG recently, the short that when we were talking about NC State big guys. A lot of Purdue fans are trolling me and stuff. But I never said that, hey, NC State's going to blow them out. I said, here's what NC State has to do to beat them. And honestly, NC State did that. However, they went cold. And what's been the story of the tournament when Purdue's, been executing and beating their opponents, give it up to Purdue. They're playing defense well. They're doing well. Zach Edey's having an all-time tournament. Nobody can say otherwise. But what are we continually being able to see when Purdue walks away with a win? And what can we reference? Ice cold streaks by their opponents at ill-advised times. Cold streaks are never at a time where you're like, you know what? Let's go on a cold streak. This is a good time to do it. There's never a good time to go on a cold streak. But when you do it late in the game, it's just a death sentence. DJ Horn was absolute fire in the first half. He hard carried NC State. Diarra couldn't really be on the floor. He kind of got phased out. You saw he didn't even start the second half. He honestly, the worst 2 games of Diarra's season were at really bad times. Still love Mo Diarra. Coming back next year, he's going to be an absolute star, no doubt. DJ Burns had 8 and 5. He had the physicality with Edey. He was okay there. He was gassed, right? Burns he was exerting so much energy. He was truly gassed. He couldn't continue on. The jaw-dropping defensive performance by Ben Middlebrooks, who played 26 minutes in that game and absolutely harassed Zach Edey to no end. Middlebrooks was curbing Edey every time on the post, and what would happen is, because Edey always goes low, like when your coach, like growing up, your coach would be like, when you grab a rebound as a big man, like, go straight up, don't dribble down, don't do your little set, your stationary dribble, like all those little guys are going to swipe it away from you, like just go straight up, right? Like, it's a very cliche thing, like, archaic playing basketball in the 90s for Boys and Girls Club, like, all right. But Edey kept doing that. There's, he does that dribble, and Middlebrooks was doing a good job stonewalling him. And then Jaden Taylor was doing a phenomenal job just bapping the ball out. Breon pass, same thing. And DJ Horn, several times they got steals just from knocking the ball out of Edey's hands when he went to do his thing, off a rebound or in the post. He's doing an extra dribble that he really didn't need to do. He can just rise up over guys. So I give Middlebrooks a lot of credit, because that was the best individual defensive performance on Edey the entire tournament. And it might've been the best individual performance on him all year. Didn't lead to a win, I know, but he did his job. Nobody on NC State should be hanging their heads. They had a great game plan. I do also think that you have to mention Michael O'Connell tripping over his own feet. I'll call it what it is. Unfortunate, bad luck, terrible variance at a wrong time, tweaked his hamstring, ends up missing, a huge chunk of the first half. He tried to come back in, could barely walk. They hit him with some painkillers. We were hoping that, the infamous cortisone shot would lead to one of those performances. You watch guys that played in the 90s do interviews and I was so high on painkillers that I would just go ham. You were hoping for one of those type of games from O'Connell, but he just couldn't go, man. And it was tough because he hit his first 3 and it was confident. And it was like, oh shoot, O'Connell's going to have the game. Like, Purdue's perimeter defense has lapsed a lot, and we've seen the mid-range as well. Like we talked about it in the Tennessee game, like I couldn't hit mid-range shots. If you are able to hit those mid-range shots, you're gonna give Purdue something to think about. They're not going to drop, Zach Edey in that drop back. He's not going to be able to do that. He's going to have to step up. And O'Connell looked like he was going to just punish the hell out of Purdue all game long. Big steal out of an Edey post move. O'Connell gets it, ahead of himself a little bit. I believe he had Horn on the right, during the fast break was going to be an easy, dish. And he trips over his own feet, lands awkwardly, hamstring just not going to cooperate. So losing a guy like O'Connell, who's been he's honestly the reason, there's a lot of reasons why they're here. It's hard to sit here and be like one guy is responsible for the reason they're here, because they got there from big performances from many players. But Michael O'Connell is the whole reason why their season continued. Hitting that the buzzer beater, sending it to overtime, NC State, the rest is history. O'Connell will always be the one that we think of for this NC State run. So losing him was a pretty big death sentence. To me, I thought, oh my God, what are they going to do? Like Breon Pass looked really, the first half, Breon Pass was suddenly hitting shots, getting steals, making things happen. It's like, oh shoot, Breon Pass is going to do some stuff here. But ultimately he's not a shooter. He's not a scorer. He's not a jump shooter. Jaden Taylor is more of a driver, relying on him to make shots. He did hit 2 threes. DJ Horn had to do the heavy lifting, and even then he shot 6 of 13, 2 of 8 from long range. DJ Burns hit a couple of jumpers, which he really needed. He had one of his post moves, but he was just so gassed he couldn't stay out there. And Diarra just didn't have it, man. Diarra was disengaged, and Diarra had 2 wide open threes, and you needed him to hit one, like at least one, to keep the defense honest. He couldn't hit any shots, missed them both, weren't even close. You saw in the second half, they started with Middlebrooks. They started with Jaden Taylor because Middlebrooks had done such a good job on Edey. Unfortunately, NC State just didn't have the options. Once Purdue adjusted and said, okay, we're just gonna harass DJ Horn now and force somebody else to hit a shot. Casey Morcell, he's not gonna hit a shot. Jaden Taylor, he's good, but he's like a young junior. He's like the youngest junior you can think of in terms of being raw. Better when he gets to the basket. You need Michael O'Connell to hit shots, and he would have, but he's not there. That would have kept the defense on their heels. That was a big reason why Purdue was able to escape with the win here. And I won't sit here and be like, oh, refs did this or whatever. Like, as far as the games went, both Final Four games were pretty cleanly officiated, I'd say. The fouls that they did call on DJ Burns and Diarra and Middlebrooks and all those guys, like they were fouls, right? Earlier in this tournament, there were games where you're like, oh, what? That wasn't a foul. So you couldn't argue with the officiating, couldn't argue with the way that Edey played down the stretch. I mean, Mason Gillis hit some timely threes. They eked out the win. They have been fortunate. And what I'm getting at here is Purdue has been fortunate on this run, but I don't make any excuses. They are here because of how good they are. So I want to make that clear for Purdue fans that have been trolling me endlessly for the last 36 hours on IG. Which I told somebody today, like, hey, if we're going to get, 250,000 views on a short, like, go ahead and troll me all day. I'll take that. But Purdue has had a very fortunate run in terms of teams just have gone ice cold. The Vols, to me, but the Vols very clearly would have won if Zakai could have made shots in the second half. Triple J made shots. They had no real answer for Zach Edey, and that was a problem. But hitting shots would have been key. You can't have your point guard shoot 1 of 8 from downtown and expect to win. And it happened to NC State. They were really in a good position at halftime. DJ Horn was on his game, but ultimately the adjustments made by Matt Painter at halftime, they were enough. You have to make shots. You can do all these fancy things. You can do all these exotic things. You can befuddle the defense. You can really outright, just confuse them. But if you can't make shots, then none of it matters. And at the end of the day, it's a very simple game. You just have to put the ball in the basket. However you do that, from Steph Curry range, dunks, whatever you got to do, you got to get that ball in the hoop. And you just can't, like in this tournament, cold streaks are such a death sentence. If you go 7-8 minutes, without a field goal, it's so hard. Unless you're UConn. I know I've been really hyping UConn a lot, and I know it's like, oh wow, they're the best team, whatever. But it's just so hard to win games. Tennessee still almost beat Purdue, despite the fact that they went on 2 major cold streaks to end halftime and the game. So now getting into this matchup, now that we've set the table, Purdue simply won't be able to afford to play the same way they just did against NC State against this UConn team. If UConn holds Zach Edey to 20-12, there is no doubt in my mind UConn is winning another championship. They would need a medieval type performance from Braden Smith, and Lance Jones will have to replicate what he just did and then some. UConn is so good at making halftime adjustments, and it's given us some live betting opportunities. It didn't really come to fruition yesterday because UConn didn't really fall behind. It got close there. But I was hoping that Bama would have taken like a halftime lead or something so we'd have that opportunity. They started to make that adjustment there, and then they really started hitting shots in the second half, and lo and behold, they extended the lead, and that was a wrap. That stretch where Caravan hit a three, got some free throws, Spencer hit a three, and it was like all of a sudden a 2-point lead is 11 in the blink of an eye. That's how UConn can roll. So Braden Smith's going to have a huge game, but the last two, the Vols really laid the blueprint for how to harass him, at least offensively. So I think UConn mirrors that, and the whole like let Edey drop 40 and contain everybody else. It sounds nice on paper, but it like the Vols did. But again, if you don't make shots, then it doesn't matter. So to me, I think yes, you try to contain Edey from 40 points, and then you're able to carry out the rest of the game as is. Klingon versus Edey is going to be a phenomenal matchup. That's going to have to be that's going to be a tightly officiated one. Defensively, got to really avoid doing what Burns did, getting handsy. Just going straight up is sometimes easier said than done. I'm really looking forward to that one. They did draw an offensive foul on Edey in the NC State game, and I think that's something that UConn can potentially do. I'm certainly not suggesting that they drive at him either. Talking about Zach Edey, we obviously know teams can't drive at Klingon because he'll push that back, and so will Edey. So it's going to come down to early establishment of three-point shooting, which means Braden Smith and Lance Jones need to be hitting shots early, and on the other side, Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton need to be hitting shots early. Caravan, also Castle, if Purdue wants to sag off of him, there's just so many different weapons and options that can operate here. I do think UConn, they have the defense to do this if they hold Purdue under 70. And I just don't think that Purdue will be fortunate enough to go through a cycle where UConn goes ice cold. And even if UConn goes ice cold, they're never truly dead. They do rise like the Undertaker out of his casket. They find a way. They make it happen. And there's just too many options. And when cold streaks happen for UConn, it's usually individual players. And you see Hassan Diar step up. I went through this earlier. Somebody on UConn will step up, lift the team up when they are in a cold streak. And I think that with the way that Purdue's played in this tournament, they deserve all the respect and kudos that they've gotten. But I don't think that the way that they played this tournament is going to be good enough to beat UConn at the end of the day. So betting wise, I am looking at, obviously UConn money line, but they're -7, which here's the thing. This game will probably be close throughout. But what happens at the last 5 minutes, UConn, they just, if their opponents miss, they hit it. They go into clutch mode. They hit a three, then they get fouled, make their free throws, hit another three. Purdue comes back, misses a three, then UConn comes on the other side, hits three. Like suddenly we're talking about 30 seconds left. UConn now has a 10-point lead. So I do think they cover. That's probably going to get me blown to smithereens by Purdue fans, but -7 UConn, -310 on the money line. The total is 145.5. I've been struggling with that one. I think it's probably a no bet, but if I had to pick one side, I do think the over has to be in play just because of the efficiency of UConn. But a lot's going to determine the first half there. That might be a live betting situation. All right, let's get into, hey. Yep, Johnny in the house here. Coach Cal in Arkansas. Yes, sir. That's another name I didn't mention. Patino back to Kentucky. I don't think that'll happen, but that is a comical thing to talk about. All right, so looking at it, with the showdown slates, we went over it during the NIT final. We kind of talked a lot about how we can do this. I'll reiterate it for those of you who are new. With showdowns, you have a couple different ways to go. One very popular method is to punt one spot in your utility, and we're talking about somebody under 2K that's potentially going to bagel or just give you a couple of points, it's not a death sentence. And it's especially true when you nail your captain. And to do that, if you're punting one spot under 2K, you're hoping that 3 or 4 of your other spots just hit that huge game, 35, 40 plus fantasy points. It didn't work out in Indiana State game because Jason Kent didn't pay off at captain, and we saw a lot of like Julian Larry had a huge game, Isaiah Swope, like some of those players. So a balanced build actually would have won the NIT showdown. And that is the other way to consider this. Like, instead of punting one spot, you just try to have a really solid group, which means you're not going to be able to captain Zach Edey. At captain, he's 20.4. So good luck. You probably won't be able to captain Donovan Clingan, who's 16.2 there, or Newton at 15.3, where it really starts becoming a situation where if you're going to go balance, Braden Smith at 13.8, Alex Caravan at 12.3, or Stephen Castle at 11.4. After Castle's performance in the Final Four, that might be the way to go, and you might see a lot of people do that. So a cheaper captain filling out the rest of your lineup with solid options who can all pay a 3x or better number. In Showdown, you don't necessarily need to hit 4x. You're looking at about 3x there because of the way that pricing is, right? So if you're going Edey or Clingan captain, then you're sacrificing those guys like Newton, Spencer, Smith, Caravan, Castle, and you're going to be filling up your lineup with a lot of, Kaufman, Wren, Camden Heide, Jalen Stewart, players like that. And that's where if you're taking I'm going to throw Caleb First in at 1K. He's probably not going to play, but maybe that, he gets a few minutes, but whatever. I'm prepared to take a 0 there. But that gets me Donovan Clingan captain and Zach Edey. And my hope here is Edey puts up 50, Donovan Clingan puts up 60 or 70 in the captain, and that bagel from Caleb First at 1K won't matter. It'll just be that he's offering me salary savings. And we do see that. If you've played any kind of showdowns this year, there has been many times where the optimal had a bagel or a very low score in it from a very, very cheap price point player. So that's the strategy wise to look at there. For me, I'm looking at, let's go through some builds here. I should probably share my screen. I don't think I have time though. Let's see. All right, let's do this. You guys see that okay? All right. What about Zach Edey? What about him, man? What about him? Yeah, fading him. I've been, fading him is a scary proposition on a showdown slate, right? So fading him it's going to take some real testicular fortitude, but Jesus, he's so expensive. So you're going to have to put him into your utility spot. I think I just don't know that you can build a good enough lineup unless you think he's in captain, he could potentially drop 100, right? So maybe it does become viable. But right now, my first initial thought is Castle at captain, that 11.4. You guys know I'm a Cam Spencer guy. I got to roll my guy Spencer. You get some cheapies here. I would have loved. Nikkei's done a nice job on the NIT final and this one of pricing guys up. Like Gillis during the season and showdown would have been like 3.8, 4K. Like if we could get him there, that would have been ideal. 5.8's a little bit tougher. 5.4 for Diarra is a little bit tougher as well, but agreeable. I would say 3.6 Camden Heide's maybe sneaky, but Heide's minutes have been going down lately. You look at it and see, heading into the tournament, he was playing like 18, 22 minutes, and they were using him a lot, and his minutes have been trickling down since. So I don't think we can even really use him because he's not cheap enough at 3.6. So we really need something there. Johnny's been on this kick about Donovan Clingan for 2 years that he's a stiff. So if you see him in chat talking about that, that's what he says. And maybe Edey does get calls, Johnny. Maybe he does. But I think the officials that are announced for the title game are actually not bad, believe it or not. All right. So the only real value we have, like a realistic value that may get some points, is Jalen Stewart down here at 2.4. And even that, his minutes have dwindled down. Like they were playing heading into the tournament, he was playing more and more. I actually used him against Stetson, way back in the first round, and he played 60 minutes and he was fairly good at the time. He was like 3.2. So again, the type of build here, if you're going cheaper at captain, you don't want to mess around with any of those guys under 4-4. The first player I could even really consider if I'm going a cheaper captain would be Samson Johnson for value. So right now, Castle, Spencer, I think, Diarra just makes a lot of sense. I would expect him to be relatively higher owned. That price for Lance Jones at 6'4" is okay. Braden Smith to me is a little too expensive at 9.2. We need somebody from Purdue, though. It does kind of push me towards one of Jones or Gillis. I still like Gillis to a degree, so let's see what that gets us. Then my man Caravan. Then we're still just with that build right there. We're still short. Like if Newton would have been 9.6, that would have been the one for me right there. But we have 3 players over 10K in the utility spot, so it definitely makes it a little bit tougher here. Let's see. And you can. So let's see what an ED captain looks like, just out of fun here. So 5.9. So this is where we would have to go. Let's go down here and punt. Ethan Morton got a few minutes. Let's see. Let's take a look at the box score here. Ethan Morton played 12 seconds, so that's going to be tough. Miles Colvin played 90 seconds. So yeah, we're going to have to take a bagel here. Let's just do it. It doesn't matter. All right. So that gets us up a little bit more. Let's take Lance Jones. Let's do Hassan Diarra. Okay, now we're cooking a little bit here with the ED captain. Right? We got some role players in here. Man, Castle still going to be, and then I wouldn't recommend that build with ED. I don't really like doing the 3-3. That one's been kind of shown to be tough. You generally want to do a 4-2 or a 5-1. But that is one example, I suppose, of a Zach Edey lineup that could potentially work, honestly. Don't worry about this stuff up here. I don't actually play on this account, so those of you who know where I live know why. All right, so let's talk about course here. So Stephen Castle, I think, is like must play. I thought he was heading into that one, but just the whole angle of the guy's going to be going in as an NBA draft pick already, so he's playing with pep in his step, and he's just one of those players who, like, he wasn't the focal point all season long, but he becomes the focal point in this moment. So Castle's got to be there. The secondary core piece for me as a somewhat value is going to be Hassan Diarra, just because UConn really goes 6-7 deep, right? And Diarra is going to play a guaranteed 20 to 22 minutes. I would have loved him to be a little bit cheaper, but we can make that 5-4 work. So Castle and Diarra are going to be the cores that I run with. If I'm going a 4-2, probably something like this, like a Kaufman Wren and a Lance Jones. Then I can come up here and take a Kling, and something like that right there with a Spencer captain. That's to me, a viable lineup. Yes, it fades Zach Edey. Yes, it fades Braden Smith. I don't feel that comfortable with Braden Smith, to be honest, anyways. But that is a type of build right there that could very well work, especially if you're, leaning towards the UConn side. That gives you, 4 of the basically 6-man, it's a 7-man rotation with Samson Johnson, but 4 of the 6 viable UConn DFS options with Lance Jones, who's going to have to play well, and a Kaufman Wren, who, as a secondary piece at 5K, we're okay there. We don't need him to necessarily put up a huge score. If you really wanted to get, somewhat cute and play Camden Heide, gives you a little bit more salary to work with, then you can come over here and play like Lawyer or just go full onslaught and say, you know what, I want a 5-man UConn stack with Camden Heide. Hopefully he hits a 3 or, 2 threes or something like that. UConn's going to take care of business. We're good to go. So you can see how those different builds go there. If you're going to play Zach Edey, you're going to be surrendering a lot. And you're going to sacrifice a ton of your options, and you're going to have to really just hope for that 60, and then that, captain bonus up there passed to a huge score, so that when your values kind of plunk out, you're going to still be okay. Yep, I know, Nate Owens. The buyouts are expensive for Oates, 4.5. I was talking about that earlier. 4.5 for Coach Drew. So we'll see how that happens. All right, so let's go over to Prize Picks. Let's look at what we got here. We have a myriad of options. Zach Edey's fantasy total sits at 47.5, by the way. So he would need, for me to play him at captain, I would really need him to hit 60. And I think he can and possibly could, but that's a really tall order against UConn still, right? All right, Cam Spencer over 30.5 fantasy points here. Let's do this while we're sharing screens. We might as well just continue. All right. So this Cam Spencer over 30.5 fantasy points. Love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah, I know. I know where I live. That one, Alex Caravan over 21.5 fantasy points. Both of those are very good. And then you come over to Castle over 22.5 fantasy points. All three of those, to me, scream over in this matchup. Even if it's not the alluring, Alabama spot where we're expecting a ton of points, which didn't really, I kind of thought UConn was going to score 100, for being honest. But even in a more physical game, if this turns into it, that still favors. Like, Caravan has already proven he can thrive in that type of situation. And Castle, like, at this point, I'm a true believer. He's catapulting into an NBA career. He can handle anything. He's going to go over 22.5. Also kind of like Newton 32.5, but right, I'm a little bit sour on him right now. It just worries me at the moment. We have been smashing 3-point props at DK, especially. Alex Caravan has a goblin prop right here of over 1.5 3-pointers made. I do like him for 2, so that is one I will be hitting there. And then Cam Spencer, who I did hit the over 2.5 yesterday. It's a demon play, over 2.5 threes. I like him for 3 or 4 triples in this game against Purdue. Just looking at the way that teams have played them, Ziegler, and we saw for NC State, all the available threes that are there against this Purdue team, Spencer will punish them. Other guys weren't able to shoot well. You give Spencer 9, 10 triples, he's going to punish you. So over 2.5 there on that demon play. In Castle, little friendly goblin play over 0.5 threes. We'll be hitting that one as well. If you want to do a little bit more, Mason Gillis, we hit that one yesterday over 1.5. He's going to have to make shots. He's going to play 25, 26, maybe even 30 minutes in this one. He takes time. All he does is roam around, grabbing rebounds and taking threes. That's what he does for this team now, and he plays solid defense. He's going to shoot 4 or 5. Can he make 2? I think he can. So we'll take the over 1.5 there too as a demon play. All right, points-wise, Spencer has missed his 15.5-point prop in back-to-back games. It's now sitting at 14 here at Prize Picks. Do like the over on Spencer. That's my guy. I'm going to be laddering him in a SGP over on DK with his points, PRA, and rebounds, assists. So I like that. You have the goblin play here of Zach Edey over 19.5. He gets 20 in his sleep, so you can hit the over on that one. Mason Gillis over 5.5 points, hit that one. And then the Spencer Goblin is only 9.5. That's pretty obvious to go over there. We'll be all over that one and all over this Stephen Castle Goblin play at 7.5. So a lot of lower numbers there, but we can patch those together and easy money is easy money because those are all going to hit over. I'm really confident in that. Let's go to the PRA because there's a couple of unders that I did like here. They made them really low. Like, you look at all the PRAs, like Caravan's at 18, Castle at 18.5. Those are 2 I really like. Gillis at 9.5. Really like that as well. The under that I'm looking at is Tristan Newton. And I'm worried about him with the way he's playing, like he's deferring a lot. but I just think there's so many options on the team that he's going to have like he's going to be solid, but it'll be like 8 and 9 real points, and then some form of 7-8 assists and however many rebounds. So I do like the under 27.5 there, because that's a little bit harder of a number to get to than most people realize. And Newton, a lot of his fantasy stuff comes from steals as well. So that is one of the unders that I'm looking at. I really had plans to hit the under on Trey Kaufman-Renn, but it's only 10, and I don't want to get baited into that, so I'm not hitting that one. I do like Caravan over 4.5 rebounds. I think he has a huge game on the glass. Like, we're talking 7 or 8 rebounds. So Caravan over 4.5 rebounds is one of my favorites. Right up there with Cam Spencer's fantasy total. And then, God, they are offering a ton of Demon and Goblin plays. There's no Kaufman-Renn here. That's okay. This one for Cam Spencer. 19 points plus rebounds. He's been so good on the glass. He had that 12 rebound game a couple games ago. He's always contributing well there, and he's always a threat to score 20 real. I know he's been under 15.5 the last 2, but over 19 points plus rebounds for Cam Spencer. We love it. We're on it. We're rolling it. Billy Donovan's never coming back to the college ranks, man. Don't even entertain that. All right, and then let's share this one next. Okay. So we already talked about, we like the Purdue, we like UConn to cover -7, obviously to win. Leaning towards the over 145.5, but I do think that'll be more of a live betting scenario. Looking at the props that we have here, -135 for Stephen Castle over 10.5 points. That's one that I like a lot. I don't see him regressing. I just see him having another huge game. He just scored over 20 points. So and he had that huge game in the Sweet 16. Look for him to score a lot. I think it actually makes the Newton under 15.5 really intriguing to me, because I think Castle, Spencer, and Caravan are going to be hitting shots, and Newton's going to be racking up those assists. So over 10.5 at -135 here for Castle. Over 13.5 for Cam Spencer. Now we're talking. Now we're cooking with Cam Spencer. It's -130, but 13.5 points for my guy. Come on. I'm all in on Cam Spencer, which is just basically how I've been every single UConn game in this tournament. So like those two. I also like Caravan to a degree, but I'm going to save it for his PRA, which we're going to go into now. It's -105 for over 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists. That to me is Lock City. So I will take the Caravan PRA for sure. I will take Castle at -105 over 18.5 PRA, and at -125 over 22.5 on Cam Spencer. They give him to us there. He's been a lock all tournament long. He's been between 21 and 22.5. The last 2, he was 23.5, and yesterday he was 24.5. Still hit. And now he's down there at 22.5, and it's -125. Thank you. I will take that all damn day without any regrets. So Spencer, PRA over, Caravan, and Castle, we are all over those. No. Let me see what the points rebounds are on Spencer. 19.5. It's okay. Caravan points rebounds number is 16.5. I do like that. Oh yeah, there's lots of so in the FTN bets tracker, if you guys have subs to that part of our site as well, all of these will be in here for myself, Randall, and of course Mike Kutry. There's a ton of options here to bet, a lot of good like alt lines here that we'll be able to string together. Yeah, we're going to be able to do some serious damage here betting wise. Like there's some really good looking ones here that we'll be able to SGP. Spencer 20 plus alt points, rebounds, assists. Castle 16 plus. Newton, like I'm on the fence there. I do really like him for peripherals, but I'm worried about his scoring. And even Braden Smith there, like, because of his assists and rebounding numbers, 20 plus, you can put together a pretty solid SGP for all of those. Let's take a look at threes and then we'll finish up. All right, so Caravan over 1.5 threes at -180. Yes, I love this one. Cam Spencer over 2.5 at +135. Like, just really, really, really like that. And then Castle over 0.5 at -140. If they sag, he's shooting. So we'll see what happens there. And the Gillis over 1.5 +40. Like, if we can SGP both of those, Spencer and Mason Gillis together, that's a pretty solid one. I actually did that yesterday and it worked out just fine. So I'll be doing that again. I just like both of their opportunities there to hit multiple 3-point shots. Gillis, just because that's what he does when he comes out there, and Spencer because Purdue's really been playing with fire, and they've been fortunate, but I don't think Spencer will go cold. I think Spencer actually heats up and has one of those just like massive, massive performances. It'll make it tough to choose between Castle and Spencer for MOP. Because I think Spencer's going to have just a silly game here in the title. And absolutely love, I made the tweet yesterday that Spencer is our generation's Marshall Henderson. He went out after the Bama game and walked directly up to like the Bama fans sitting out there, right? And basically waved to them and said, "The game's over, time to go home." And I know a lot of people will look at that same kind of comment of Hurley talking about making a hard tournament look easy. And a lot of people will look at that and say, you know, wow, that's just cocky. I can't handle that. I don't like that. That's just totally, you know, I don't believe he said that. But I love it. You know, being from the 90s era that I am, like, you know, trash talking was just part of sports, and Marshall Henderson didn't have the level of success that Spencer and UConn are about to have, but he could back up his trash talk, and Spencer does as well. And since coming to UConn, he's been really prevalent, and it's been talked about how much he trash talks, but it's nothing new. He did that at his previous stops when he was at Rutgers and Loyola and all that as well. It's just more available to you to see as well. But just going up to their fan base, telling them that it's over, to go home, like, it's setting him up to, if they lose, he's gonna get pelted, but he's a good sport about it. And if they do lose, like, he'll be the first one to talk about how bad of a performance it was for them. So you got to respect somebody who talks trash, can dish it, but can also take it. There are very few out there who can, but he's definitely one of them that can. And that's something that I respect and appreciate when it comes to my trash talkers. And you're talking about me. I grew up, again, in the 90s as a Sonics fan in Seattle. Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. Gary Payton was just an all-time trash talker and backed it up. So I just kind of where I'm wired for that stuff. All right, Dave, let's throw out any final questions, comments, any things you guys want to talk about before we wrap up here. We're just over an hour, so we're running fine on time. What's your thoughts on Braden Smith 5.5 rebounds? I like that because he impacts the game so much, whether it's on the glass, dropping assists, or he can catch fire and knock down threes, make things happen. We saw him in the Gonzaga game. He was making shots, very confident, huge game, 15 assists. Like, Braden Smith, he can cook. His peripherals are very safe. You see in the 5 tournament games so far, he has beaten that number in 3 of them, and that happens to be the last 3. Obviously, the first 2 games, major blowouts playing Grambling. He had 10 assists in that game, but 5 rebounds against Utah State, which was an embarrassing game. He basically got pulled way early. Only 4 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 points, but he played 22 minutes because Utah State, they laid down after the first 2 minutes. Very tough game to watch. Then against Gonzaga, 8 rebounds in 40 minutes. Closer game, had to play the whole time. Tennessee, closer game, played 36 minutes. He had 7 rebounds. NC State, closer game, played 40 minutes, 8 rebounds. So even when he's struggling offensively, turning it over, he had 5 turnovers in the last game, he's still getting to the glass. And you see there's a ton of times in that NC State game where he was just rebounding long misses. Normally, Edie's down there doing his thing, Coppin, Wren, but there's those missed threes or those missed jumpers. And when those pop out, Smith tends to be the guy around the ball in those long rebounds, and that's why he's been able to rack up those rebounds, because he's very good at tracking them down, but he's one of those guys that just happens to be around the ball all the time, knows angles, very, alert, very aware of what's going on. So I do like that. That's a good call out. I didn't bring that one up, but that is one that I think has merit to use. What is it? Plus 124 on DK, over 5.5 rebounds. The unders minus 160, but I think there is a better chance of him getting it than not. Obviously, going up against UConn, that's a tough order, but falls into a situation where UConn's missing shots, long rebounds coming off. Braden Smith's going to have those rebounds. You can rest assured he's going to have one of his like patented 14, 7, and 7 type of stat lines, or he's going to have to, at least, if Purdue's going to win. So yeah, over 5.5 rebounds at plus 124. That's an excellent call out. Good work on that one. Can I please get your thoughts on Stephen Castle? Points over 10.5, Zach Edey over 13.5 rebounds and assists. Yes, on Castle, I do think he has another masterful performance as he solidifies himself as a lottery pick. Certainly, going to be active early. He's just so good, man. He's just all over the place. So I do like that. Edey's probably going to have like 15 rebounds alone. And then, we know he gets assists out of the double. So yeah, over 13.5 rebounds and assists for Zach Edey. That does seem one. I'm more comfortable with that than taking like his PRA, which is always high, or his fantasy total on Prize Picks, which is always high. I do like that one. That is one I'm way more comfortable to deal with. This is my 2-man parlay. I believe UConn will win just off better guard play, but Edey will make it a game till the final whistle. Yeah, I think it'll be close too. I definitely agree. What they did against, let's see, you got the wrong one here. What they did to Illinois made me a believer, and I love Purdue. Edey and him all year. Yeah, he's been, betting wise, yeah, that's a great move. Like DFS wise, we've been fading him a lot, and he's been putting up like 40, 50s, whatever, but it's just price is so high. But yeah, props wise, especially when it comes to those secondary stats, like if you can get a blocks or, steals number there, they'd provided some of those earlier in the year. Like any of his peripheral numbers over, I do like. But that one, the 13.5 rebounds and assists, that's a great call out as well. I think that's the optimal way to approach it there and not go with his points like you were saying. All right. So I think that about wraps it up. That's the Natty in a nutshell there. I'm going to be definitely live tweeting, as we go, tilting. A lot of people that are in the Discord, you guys know the whole tilting shtick thing that we do. A lot of times newer people that don't sub or maybe they're newer to FTN, or they see what we tweet are like, damn, what that guy's got some issues. And that might be true. I may. But I assure you the superstitious person that I am requires me to tweet out some of the outlandish things that I tweet. So rest assured and know that I'm okay here. I don't have to be committed yet. Probably close, but that's just the style of tilting that I like to do. There's also a site that a few other people in the industry use more at the media level, not DFS, that live watch games with people. That's something that I'm going to try to look into, and if I can get that figured out, I will have the game running live and also just hanging out with people, talking, doing our thing. Still might do that anyways on Twitter, potentially, especially if anybody has a sweat that's in the community. So be prepared for that. And then anyone who did the brackets on FTN or the Supershow bracket or the player league draft that we did, the payouts for that will be happening Tuesday morning. So after the game goes final, all the stats and everything, you can expect those payouts on Tuesday morning. Just make sure that if you're the winner, you DM me or message me on Discord or Twitter with your payment information, and we'll get you taken care of. All right. Yeah, man, definitely. So please do. We, not only just like the collegiate stuff, but we have obviously pro sports. We have optimizers. We've got projections, articles, live shows for subs only all the time at the pro level. We cover a lot of the niche sports stuff. Our NFL team, like if you're into the NFL at all, like, man, we've got like the the, DVOA creator mastermind on our team. Frequently got those guys getting, Super Bowl credentials, draft. Like a lot of them went to the draft workouts and everything. Like really sharp group of people. So ftnbets.com or ftndaily.com. You can check out either of those. I highly recommend it, not just because I work there, but I do believe in it. If I didn't work for this company, I would want to, and I would certainly be subbing to them because the information that is provided on the betting team and the DFS team, as well as Dynasty and Season Long, is second to none. All right. I think that'll wrap it up. One last one here. Zach Edey points 24.5. I don't know. I just don't want to touch his points. Like UConn can make some things happen here. When he does his post moves and stuff, I do think UConn's going to harass him. They'll be able to build on what NC State showed there with the way that Middlebrooks was stonewalling him. And then just when he goes to do that, his dribble, just get those hands in there, start swatting around. Yeah, you might get called for some fouls if the refs are calling it tight, but it's going to make him think about it. And you force him into a couple of bad shots, or you get him out of rhythm. And then on the defensive end, you're hitting threes because they have several, Caravan, he can hit threes. Klingon, not so much, but Samson Johnson perhaps, and just make Edey uncomfortable. The name of the game, and really the best way to handle this, is to make him uncomfortable, both on offense and defense, and make him think. He's so good and so automatic. He's so just a well-oiled machine under Painter. A lot of what he does is just, you don't have to think. He goes into a set and his move, game over, he scores, on to the next one. Swatting shots, like the dude's a terminator of a player. Please, if you're a Purdue fan, I am not trash talking Zach Edey or Purdue. He is really good. But there has been ways to frustrate him, and we've seen them recently in the last two tournament games. The other teams just couldn't close with their shooting. So make him uncomfortable, keep him at 20 points, get in Braden Smith shorts, and that'll be the rest. And obviously make shots. Simple as putting the ball in the hoop sometimes, but that is the way to do it. So I'm going to be on the peripherals there for Edey. But there are a lot of softer props for this game. I'm actually surprised. There were some lines there in the tournament that were like, they could go either way. There are a ton of overs that I like on this one. And again, those will be on the tracker, and I will provide 2 on Twitter tomorrow before the game that I really like in case you guys want to tail those as well. All right. Appreciate everybody for continuing to support the show. Remember, this isn't the end. It's just a minor goodbye. At the conclusion of summer, we'll be back. We'll be doing the week 0 CFB breakdowns. And then before you know it, it'll be back in the college basketball season. The good thing is you'll still be able to hang out with me if you want to every Wednesday night on the FTN Network. Interviews, talking about the offseason, transfer portal, coaching changes, and previews about every team, every conference for the entire summer. Please check that out when you get an opportunity. Thanks, everybody. Lots of green screens in your future tomorrow and trips to the window. Let's get after it. Take care and enjoy the national championship. One shining moment. I'm out.